Hello, everybody. I come bearing some good news. Artists don't have to starve anymore. Isn't that wonderful? I mean, honestly, right? Let's imagine calling a doctor a starving doctor, right? Or referring to a teacher as a starving teacher, or even a trash man as a starving trash man, right? Or maybe even a police officer as a starving police officer. How ridiculous would it sound to put those essential workers in the category of being starving, knowing what they do for our society and our community every day, right? I challenge you to think about what your life would be like without art and without artists in it. What would your life be like every day not being able to turn on the radio in the car or plug in your iPhone or be able to get that Netflix and chill with your boo, right? Or to listen to that song that dug you out of the depths of a heartbreak, right? What would your life be like without having access to hieroglyphics or cave drawings that give us context for past societies, right? I challenge us to think the role that art plays in a society at large. My name is Asa Jackson. I'm an artist. And I want to tell you a little bit about my story and my path to sustainability as an artist. About 14 years ago, I was a junior at Boston University. I was a sociology student on a full academic scholarship. But actually, I was making art and meeting people, trying to figure out how to get my art into the world, much more than I was spending time in class at that time. I had an itch. I wanted to be an artist. I wanted to get my career started. And like most artists at that time, I did what most artists think they should do. I packed up everything, took the last little bit of money that my grandmother had left behind for me to finish school, and I moved to New York City, right? Not knowing exactly what I was gonna do or how I was gonna do it, I know I had to be on the scene. So when I got to New York, I was there for just a few weeks, meeting and greeting, making my way around the city. And I got a call from a long time on and off girlfriend from high school that she was pregnant and that we'd be expecting our first child in a few months. And so now, trying to make a career for myself, I had the double pressure of trying to find sustainability in a career, knowing that I was gonna be welcoming my first child into the world soon. And so I had this, the pressure was on. And so luckily, in New York City, on the scene, I was moving around, meeting and greeting people. I had a string of early successes in that first year out of college, which led to some shows, and then I landed my first contract in the tri-state area in Greenwich, Connecticut. And I had some early success, but I had no idea how to sustain it. So after that month-long exhibition was over, where we made almost 6 figures, which is a heck of a debut as a young artist, a 22-year-old, I didn't know what to do next. And so when that 6-month contract was over, I found myself moving back to Hampton, Virginia, where I grew up, to raise my son closer to my family. And in that time, in that few months, I felt myself transition from being thought of as one of the top emerging talents in the tri-state area, gracing the covers of magazines and publications, to now being back home thought of as a local artist and being put in a group of amateurs and professionals in mid-career and looking at a landscape that I didn't feel like could serve or sustain me. But I was here and I had to make it work. So I started studying other places, other people, other figures that have been facing things like me in other places around the world where arts was thriving, and trying to figure out what are the elements of those communities that make art thrive, and how I could seek those same things out within my community. And so early on in my studies, I actually came across a gentleman named Walter Hopps. He was a pioneer of the LA art scene. He was around in the 1950s and had a tenured career up into the early 2000s. And what he discovered as a young curator, trying to do the same things I was doing, is that every environment, every community has a few key elements, right? And these key elements lend themselves to creating a sustainable arts ecosystem in which artists can thrive and find success. So what are those 5 key points, and do we have them in all of our environments? So number one, you have to have globally competitive art being made and housed in your community. And I know globally competitive may be a loaded statement, but is it artwork that can be taken to another place and still hold up as valuable, right? Number two, you have to have spaces within a community that the art can be shown as accessible to the public as possible and also in the best light, right? A space that elevates the work and not de-elevates the work. And what are spaces? Spaces can be galleries, they can be public space where people gather outdoors. Spaces can be theaters. Spaces can be municipal buildings, schools, wherever people can get to the art as often as possible. The third key to this sustainability path for the arts is documentation, because documentation gives a stamp of history. We were here, this happened there, I took a picture, we wrote about it. And in the art world, we call that provenance. And this is how you actually learn the value of something that you're looking at, the who, what, when, where, how, and why that made it so. But also documentation serves the purpose of pushing something forward, sort of PR, right? The fourth point to sustainability is museum buy-in or tie-in, right? As it pertains to the visual arts, but as it pertains to other art forms, you can call it an industry cosign, right? When somebody from an institutional background is now vetting or dealing with you, it sort of lends itself to a stamp of value. When you go into a museum subconsciously, we all know that when you're there, you're seeing beautiful masterpieces on the wall, you know that they're spoken for, that they're expensive, and that the artists that made them are important enough to have made it into history to be in that museum. Those are all subconscious things that our mind are telling us, but this is the sort of credibility that a museum can lend to a scenario. And then the fifth point on that wheel of sustainability is the patron. And this is where you all are involved, right? I would challenge us to think that all of us play a point on that ecosystem. In the same way I illustrated, what life would be like without the arts in your daily life, driving down the street. Well, what role do you play in sustaining the arts in your own community, right? What is a patron? What is a space? What is an artist, right? What is documentation, right? I see somebody right here with their iPhone on me right now. That's documentation. They're making the moment last, right? So we all can be documentarians. What is a patron, right? The power of somebody to make some money flow through a situation, right? Or to give of their time and resources to further a situation. So I would say, looking at those 5 points, I was able to take them and overlay them back on my career and figuring out what steps to take within this environment that could find sustainability for myself, but also for my peers. And so in that time, I developed a hat collection, right? So I've been wearing the artist hat for a long time. And then that led me to wearing the gallerist hat and the curator hat, and then the executive director hat, and then being appointed as a state arts commissioner to manage the state art budget and wear the commissioner hat. And all these vantage points showed me different spots on the ecosystem wheel and how this thing is sustained, right? And so just as I mentioned in the beginning, how ridiculous it would be, right, for someone to refer to a doctor as a starving doctor, or even to live in a society where the possibility of a starving doctor could exist. I would challenge you to think how ridiculous it is to live with the concept of a starving artist. Those people who we task to tell our stories to the next generation. Those people who we task to bring us comedy, humor, love, and laughter into our lives on a daily basis, right? So what role do you play in sustaining the arts? And how can the arts sustain your community? We often think of, cities like New York City as big art hubs, or Los Angeles or Houston as a big art hub, but how do they become that way? It's those 5 points. So what role do you play? And I challenge you to go back into your communities and figure out how you can activate that role on that ecosystem. Thank you.